The European Monetary Union has had its ups and downs since its establishment to ensure a more integrated Europe. To discuss the development of the single currency union, today we're talking to Alf Vanags, Director of Baltic International Center for Economic Policy Studies. Now, if we look at the European Monetary Union from its launch to the present day, what to your mind have been the key accomplishments as well as the main challenges faced?
Well, I think the first accomplishment is simply that it exists, because there's been a plan to have a single currency in Europe since 1970 with a thing called the Werner, or 71, a thing called the Werner Plan. That was kind of derailed by the oil crisis in the 70s. Getting there, yeah, through a whole series of currency crises like in 1992 and so on, I think is a great accomplishment. Although we knew, everybody who was involved in sort of thinking about the single currency and the monetary union were aware of some of the sort of fiscal issues which have caused some problems. What nobody really understood and forecast or foresaw was the way in which the financial markets developed and have been able to destabilize sort of sovereign countries. Yeah, this was these financial innovation in the financial instruments, I think, has caused unanticipated problems, and that's really been the main challenge. The financial markets are now sort of ruling things, quote unquote, much more than they did when the monetary union was designed.
Okay, but two countries, UK and Denmark, they decided to opt out from entry into the Eurozone. Do you think perhaps that their decision could somehow hinder further and stronger integration of Europe, considering that adoption of the euro is the third stage of the economic and monetary union?
Well, I think the two countries are very, very different. They're different in size, they're different in the motivation for why they are not in the single currency, in the Eurozone. The UK clearly is a major problem for Europe generally, and especially with conservative governments. And so it's not non-entry into the Eurozone is just one part of this, right? I mean, they're now talking of leaving the European Union altogether. So Denmark, on the other hand, is, pretty committed European. They don't have to join the Eurozone, but they've had a fixed exchange rate against the euro throughout the whole of the period of the single currency, and they cause no threat to the European Union. UK definitely does, but not directly not only to do with the European single currency.
Okay, I also want to discuss the Maastricht criteria. We know that Latvia fully met the convergence criteria and is going to adopt the euro next year, 1st of January. But at the same time, we do have a number of experts, economists saying that despite fulfilling the Maastricht criteria, Latvia is lagging in economic and social indicators, thus not really ready to join the Eurozone. On the other hand, we do have another country that's not really rushing to enter the Euro area, Poland, whose finance minister is saying that fulfilling the Maastricht criteria is not sufficient because Poland has to undergo rigorous structural reforms. Now, to your mind, is meeting the convergence criteria enough to assess whether a country is ready to enter the single currency union?
Well, the short answer, of course, is no, because the Maastricht criteria are somewhat arbitrary and were designed in the 1990s when a different kind of thinking and experience was operating. So no, they're definitely not not sufficient. On the other hand, if you take a country like Latvia, what kind of options does it have? You see, in contrast to Poland, which is a big country, and it can sort of rather successfully operate a floating exchange rate. Floating exchange rate for a very small country like Latvia with a very thin, small currency, thin foreign exchange market would be somewhat potentially very unstable. So a fixed exchange rate is a good option for Latvia. Then the question is if Latvia is never going to use the exchange rate instrument for policy purposes, and with the current central bank governor, it's over his dead body to change the exchange rate. If they're never going to use the exchange rate instrument, then they might as well be in the Eurozone.
Okay, but again, and one topic that I think it's important is the Euroscepticism. According to The Guardian, a poll conducted among six largest countries of the European Union, specifically, namely Spain, Poland, Italy, Germany, UK, and France, the level of Euroscepticism has reached record high levels.
I think the European Union has a big problem. I think that, and this is not just to do with the single currency. I think the problems with the single currency have exacerbated it. But I believe there are some quite genuine, serious kind of credibility problems for the European Union, and the way it's tackling them is by propaganda rather than by real action, in my opinion.
Okay, so I guess you don't think that in the current state that the European monetary is in, it can continue successfully functioning?
Well, I mean, I think of course it can. I don't think it's going to collapse, right? It doesn't. It's not going to collapse, but the credibility of the whole European project is not as high as it used to be. That's why the British can talk relatively seriously about simply leaving the European Union, voluntarily, having a referendum and leaving the European Union. I mean, the last time they talked like that was in the 1970s, when they did have a rather convoluted referendum. So the credibility of the European Union generally, I think, is on the line at the moment.
So what do you think that is necessary to improve the current conditions? A lot of people are talking about fiscal, political integration. George Soros proposed Eurobonds. What do you think is the recipe for success?
We need to do two things. One, of course, you have to sort out the current situation with the debt problems and so on and so on. So that's a sort of historical thing, yeah? It has to be sorted out. And then you have to think, well, what kind of long-run Europe you want. And clearly there are strong arguments for having a more integrated Europe with much stronger fiscal integration. The issue of Eurobonds, Eurobonds by themselves, Eurobonds won't solve where we are now, right? If you are going to have them in the future, then you have to have an institution that kind of runs them. So, for example, in the United States, which is a federal system, the US bonds, treasury bills, and so on, are issued by the US Treasury. The European Union does not have a treasury. Yeah, you'd have to have some sort of mechanism like that, whereby the EU Treasury issues Eurobonds, and then you have the issue, well, what about the individual countries? Now, then you can have what mechanism you have is not entirely, it can be variable. But for example, if you take a country like Latvia, local authorities, which is the level down from the center, are not free to borrow unconditionally. They have to borrow with the permission of or through the Latvian treasury. So you're going to have sort of something like that. And the other thing that you're going to have is that to the extent that individual countries borrow, then they should be allowed to go bankrupt, not bailed out. So you see, the problem is that two different things have been conflated and confused. There's Greece, for example, going bankrupt does not mean that it can't go on using the euro as a currency. It can just go bankrupt. Yeah. So the whole thing needs to be sort of rethought, and especially in the light of how the financial markets now operate and the sort of power that they have to destabilize. And so you have to have some sort of countervailing power to those financial markets.
That was Alf Vanags, Director of Baltic International Center for Economic Policy Studies, who discussed the progress of the European Monetary Union. For more exclusive interviews and news updates, stay tuned with Dukascopy TV.